My family said I was their biggest mistake, so I silently disappeared and built an empire they'll never touch. Now, let's continue the story. The words hit me like a freight train on Christmas morning. Zara, you were our biggest mistake. We should have never had you. My mother, Patricia, said this while unwrapping gifts with my siblings around our cramped living room in Detroit. The smell of burnt ham filled the air, mixing with the tension that always followed me into every family gathering. I was 25, working 2 jobs to help pay their mortgage while living in their basement. My siblings, Marcus, 28, and Keisha, 30, both lived rent-free upstairs with their kids. But somehow, I was the burden. The mistake. Every dollar we spent on you could have gone to Marcus's business or Keisha's nursing school, Dad chimed in, not even looking up from his newspaper. You just take and take. The living room went silent. My nephews stopped playing with their new toys. Even baby Amara seemed to sense the cruelty hanging in the air. I felt my chest tighten, that familiar burning behind my eyes that I'd learned to suppress years ago. I pay half your mortgage, I whispered, my voice barely audible. And you should be grateful we let you, Patricia snapped. After all the disappointment you've caused this family. That's when something inside me shattered, not with sadness, but with crystal clear determination. I looked around at their faces, memorizing this moment. The moment I decided they'd never see me coming. I stood up slowly, grabbed my jacket, and walked toward the door. You know what? You're absolutely right. I was a mistake, your mistake for underestimating me. The door slammed behind me, and I never looked back. 3 days later, I executed my plan with military precision. While they were at Marcus's basketball game, I moved out everything I owned, which wasn't much. Just my laptop, clothes, and the business plan I'd been secretly working on for 2 years. My best friend, Aaliyah, helped me load her Honda Civic. Girl, are you sure about this? That's your family, she said, hefting my last box. Family doesn't call you their biggest mistake, I replied, closing the trunk. I'd found a studio apartment in Midtown Detroit for $850 a month. Every penny I'd been giving them would now go toward my future. I left a note on the kitchen counter, since I was such a mistake, I'm correcting it. Don't contact me. But here's what they didn't know, I'd been building something in secret. For 2 years, I'd been developing a mobile app for small businesses to manage their social media. Late nights in that basement, I taught myself coding, graphic design, and digital marketing. While they slept above me, I was building my empire. My phone buzzed constantly for weeks. Patricia, Zara, stop being dramatic. Marcus, Mom's worried sick. Keisha, we didn't mean it like that. But I remembered exactly how they meant it. The way Marcus laughed when Dad said it. How Keisha nodded in agreement. How Patricia smiled like she'd finally said what she'd been thinking for years. I blocked all their numbers and social media. If I was their mistake, then I'd become their biggest regret. 6 months into my exile, I launched Social Sphere, my business management app. I'd saved $12,000 from the money I used to give my family, and I invested every penny into development and marketing. The first week, I had 3 customers. By month 2, 37. Small businesses loved how easy it was to schedule posts, track engagement, and manage multiple platforms from one dashboard. Aaliyah became my unofficial business partner, handling customer service while I focused on coding new features. We worked from my tiny studio, surviving on ramen and dreams. Your family keeps asking about you, she mentioned one evening, scrolling through messages. Patricia even showed up at my job yesterday. What did you tell her? That you were doing well and didn't want contact. Aaliyah paused. She looked different. Smaller somehow. I felt a twinge of something, not quite guilt, but maybe curiosity. Then I remembered Christmas morning and the feeling passed. My app was gaining traction. I'd appeared on 2 local business podcasts and gotten featured in Detroit Entrepreneur magazine. The irony wasn't lost on me. The family's biggest mistake was becoming Detroit's rising star. But success was lonely. Some nights, lying in my studio apartment, I'd think about Sunday dinners and family game nights. Then I'd remember how they made me feel invisible, like my dreams didn't matter, like I was just a burden taking up space. Those memories fueled my late-night coding sessions. Congratulations, Ms. Washington. TechConnect wants to acquire Social Sphere for $2.8 million. I nearly dropped my phone. My lawyer, Janet Morrison, a sharp African-American woman I'd hired with my first real profits, was calling with news that would change everything. They want to keep you on as Chief Technology Officer with a $200,000 salary plus equity, Janet continued. This is a remarkable offer for an 18-month-old startup. I was sitting in my new 1-bedroom apartment in Royal Oak, having finally escaped that cramped studio. Through my window, I could see the Detroit skyline where I'd once felt so small. I need to think about it, I said, though my heart was already pounding with excitement. That night, Aaliyah and I celebrated with wine and takeout Chinese food. Girl, you did it. You actually did it, she screamed, dancing around my living room. But as I looked at the acquisition papers, I felt an unexpected emotion, not just pride, but a deep, satisfying sense of vindication. The mistake child was about to become a millionaire at 26. I thought about calling my family, sharing this moment. Then I remembered Patricia's voice, every dollar we spent on you was wasted. Instead, I called Janet. Accept the offer. But I have conditions. The next morning, I signed the papers that made me a multimillionaire. The same hands my family said would never amount to anything had just signed a deal worth more than their house, cars, and debts combined. I was no longer their mistake. I was their biggest regret waiting to happen. 2 years after the acquisition, I was thriving as CTO while secretly developing my next venture, a fintech startup called WealthBridge, designed to help underbanked communities access financial services. My net worth had grown to $4.2 million through smart investments and stock options. That's when Aaliyah brought me disturbing news. Zara, I think your family is in serious trouble, she said, sliding a folder across my desk in our downtown office. I'd hired her as my chief marketing officer. Loyalty deserved to be rewarded. I don't care what. Just look, she interrupted. The folder contained printed social media posts, news articles, and court documents. Marcus's business had been a pyramid scheme that collapsed, taking down dozens of families. He was facing federal fraud charges. Keisha had been fired from her nursing job for stealing prescription drugs to fuel an addiction nobody knew about. She was in rehab, but the bills were astronomical. And my parents? They'd taken out a second mortgage to bail out Marcus and pay for Keisha's treatment. Now they were 3 months behind on payments, facing foreclosure. They're losing everything, Aaliyah said quietly. Patricia tried to reach me again last week. She was crying, Zara. Said they made the biggest mistake of their lives. I stared at the foreclosure notice dated for next month. The house I'd helped them keep afloat for years was finally sinking, without me to throw them a lifeline. She said that, huh? I laughed, but it came out hollow. Now I'm not the biggest mistake anymore. For the first time in 3 years, I felt a crack in my armor. The crack widened when I drove past their neighborhood that weekend. I told myself I was just testing a new route to Aaliyah's place, but I knew better. I was haunting my own past. Their house looked smaller than I remembered. The lawn was overgrown, paint peeling from the shutters. Dad's prized Buick was gone, probably repossessed. A bright yellow foreclosure notice was taped to the front door like a scarlet letter. As I sat in my BMW, bought with my first big bonus, watching the house that raised me crumble, I saw her. Patricia, walking slowly to the mailbox, looking every one of her 63 years. Her shoulders were bent under an invisible weight, and when she saw the foreclosure notice, she just stood there staring at it. For a moment, I wanted to get out of the car. To walk over and tell her everything would be okay. That her biggest mistake could write a check and make all their problems disappear. Then I remembered Christmas morning. The laughter when Dad said those words. How Marcus had high-fived him. How Keisha nodded like she'd been thinking the same thing for years. I drove away, but the image of Patricia's broken posture stayed with me for weeks. Aaliyah noticed my distraction. "You're thinking about helping them, aren't you?" "They wouldn't want my help," I said, but we both knew that wasn't true anymore. "The question is, do you want to give it?" I didn't answer because I didn't know. 3 years ago, I would have done anything for their approval. Now I had the power to save them, but did they deserve saving? The knock on my apartment door came at 9:47 p.m. on a Thursday. I was reviewing investor presentations for WealthBridge when I heard the soft, hesitant tapping. Through the peephole, I saw someone I barely recognized. Keisha stood in my hallway looking like a shadow of herself. She'd lost at least 40 pounds, her once vibrant skin was ashen, and her eyes held a desperation I'd never seen before. She was clean, I could tell, but recovery had left her looking fragile and raw. "How did you find me?" I asked through the door, not opening it. "Aaliyah's boyfriend," she whispered. "Please, Zara. Just 5 minutes." Against my better judgment, I opened the door. She stepped inside and immediately started crying, not the manipulative tears I expected, but the broken sobs of someone who had lost everything. "I know you hate us," she began, sitting on my couch uninvited. "I know we don't deserve your help. But Mama's sick, Zara. Really sick." "What do you mean?" "High blood pressure, diabetes. The stress from everything, Marcus's trial, my addiction, losing the house, it's killing her. She had a small stroke last week." My hands went cold. Whatever anger I held, I never wanted Patricia truly hurt. "She keeps saying your name," Keisha continued. "Says she was wrong about you. That you were never the mistake, we all were. For treating you like you didn't matter." "Stop," I said, but my voice cracked. "She asked me to find you. Not for money, she won't even let me ask for that. She just wants to apologize before she dies." The word "dies" hit me like a physical blow. Suddenly, I wasn't a successful entrepreneur, I was just a daughter who missed her mother. Against every logical bone in my body, I followed Keisha to Detroit Medical Center the next morning. Patricia looked so small in that hospital bed, hooked up to machines that beeped steadily in the quiet room. She was awake when we entered, and when she saw me, her eyes filled with tears. "My baby girl," she whispered, reaching out a shaky hand. I stood frozen in the doorway. Part of me wanted to run, to protect the armor I'd built around my heart. But seeing her like this, so vulnerable and broken, I felt something shift inside me. "Hi, Mama," I said, finally taking her hand. "I'm so sorry, Zara. We were wrong, so wrong about you. You were never our mistake. You were our miracle, and we were too blind to see it." Her voice was weak but clear. "Look at what you've built. Look at the woman you became. We didn't deserve you." Dad sat in the corner, looking older than his 65 years. "I looked you up," he said quietly. "Saw the articles about your company. I'm proud of you, baby girl. I should have said that years ago. For 3 years, I'd imagined this moment differently, them begging for money, me turning them away with cold satisfaction. But sitting in that sterile hospital room, holding my mother's frail hand, all I felt was exhausted sadness. "Why now?" I asked. "Why couldn't you see my worth before I had to prove it by leaving?" Because we were fools, Patricia said simply. Scared fools who pushed away the strongest one among us. The monitors beeped steadily as we sat in silence, 3 years of pain hanging between us like a heavy curtain. Patricia was discharged 3 days later, and I found myself doing something I swore I'd never do, sitting around their kitchen table again. The house felt different now, smaller and sadder, filled with the weight of consequences. Marcus joined us via video call from county jail, awaiting sentencing. He looked hollow, the cocky confidence I remembered completely gone. Zara, I owe you the biggest apology. I was jealous, man. You always had your stuff together, and I felt like a failure next to you. So you made me feel like one instead, I said, not harshly, just stating fact. Yeah. And I'm sorry. I'm so damn sorry. Dad cleared his throat. We called this meeting because we want to be honest about everything. We lost the house. Marcus is probably going to prison for 3 to 5 years. Keisha's in outpatient treatment that costs $800 a month. We got nothing left but our pride, and that ain't worth much these days. We're not asking for money, Patricia added quickly. We don't have the right to ask you for anything. But I could see the foreclosure notice on their counter. I knew their medical bills were overwhelming them. I knew they were probably eating rice and beans every night because it's all they could afford. What if I wanted to help? I asked quietly. Why would you? Keisha asked. After everything we did. It was a fair question. Why would I help the people who made me feel worthless for 25 years? The answer surprised even me. Because holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting someone else to die, I said. And because family isn't just about blood, it's about choosing to love people even when they don't deserve it. If I help you, and I'm not saying I will, it comes with conditions, I announced, standing up from the kitchen table. Non-negotiable conditions. They nodded eagerly, hanging on every word. First, Marcus, you take full responsibility for your actions. No blaming the system, no excuses. You serve your time with dignity and use it to figure out who you want to be when you get out. Done, he said through the screen. Second, Keisha, you stay in treatment for as long as it takes. No cutting corners, no, I'm fine now nonsense. Recovery is a lifetime commitment. I promise, she whispered. Third, you both get jobs when you're able, real jobs, not get-rich-quick schemes. You contribute to this family instead of just taking from it. They nodded vigorously. And finally, I looked directly at Patricia and Dad, you never, ever make anyone in this family feel worthless again. Not me, not each other, not Marcus's kids, not anyone. Words have power, and you wielded yours like weapons against your own daughter. Patricia started crying again. We'll never do that again, baby. Never. I'll pay off the house and cover medical expenses, I continued. But I'm not your ATM. This is a one-time reset, not a recurring subscription to bail you out of bad decisions. How much will this cost you? Dad asked. About $180,000 total. It's less than I made in bonuses last quarter. I let that sink in. The daughter you called your biggest mistake makes more in 3 months than you've saved in 30 years. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. 6 months after I rescued my family from financial ruin, I discovered something that changed everything. I was going through old papers in Patricia's attic, helping her organize documents for tax season, when I found a folder labeled, Zara, College Fund. Inside were bank statements showing that my parents had indeed saved money for my college education, nearly $40,000 over 18 years. But the withdrawals told a different story: money taken from Marcus's failed business ventures, Keisha's car payments, family vacations I wasn't invited on. My college fund had been systematically drained to fund my siblings' dreams while I worked 3 jobs to pay for community college myself. Confronting them that evening, I watched Patricia's face crumble as I spread the bank statements across their kitchen table. You had money for my education, I said, my voice deadly calm. You had it, and you chose to give it to them instead. We thought they needed it more, Dad said weakly. You were always so independent, so capable of handling things yourself. So you punished me for being strong. You made me struggle because I didn't fall apart like they did. It wasn't punishment, baby. It was worse than punishment. It was abandonment. I stood up, gathering the papers. You abandoned me emotionally, financially, and then had the audacity to call me your biggest mistake. Keisha, who'd been silent until now, finally spoke. Zara, we were wrong. So incredibly wrong. You were more than wrong. You were cruel. I looked around the table at their guilty faces. I saved this family not because you deserved it, but because I'm a better person than you raised me to be. That night, I made a decision that would define the rest of our relationship. 1 year after rebuilding their lives, I invited my family to dinner at the Townsend Hotel in Birmingham, not because they deserved luxury, but because I had news that required the right setting. They arrived looking uncomfortable in their best clothes, still adjusting to having me back in their lives. The hostess seated us in a private dining room I'd reserved for the occasion. Why all the fancy treatment? Marcus asked. He'd been released early for good behavior and was working as a mechanic, trying to rebuild his reputation one day at a time. Because tonight, you learn who your daughter really is, I said, sliding a folder across the table. Inside were articles about Wealthbridge Series B funding round, $50 million from major investors, valuing my company at $200 million. My personal net worth had just crossed $30 million. Patricia's hands shook as she read the Forbes article titled, Detroit's Youngest Black Female Tech CEO Revolutionizes Financial Services. This is you. Dad whispered, staring at my photo on the magazine cover. This is me. The mistake who built an empire you'll never touch. The silence was deafening as they absorbed the magnitude of what their daughter had accomplished without them. Zara, Marcus said slowly, you're worth $30 million. As of last Tuesday's valuation, yes. And you saved our house with pocket change, Keisha realized. I saved your house with less than 1% of my net worth, yes. They sat there stunned, finally understanding the full scope of what they'd tried to destroy. Their biggest mistake wasn't just successful, she was legendary. I need you all to understand something, I continued. I didn't build this empire for your approval. I built it despite your disapproval. You created a monster of determination when you told me I was worthless. Today, as I write this from my office on the 40th floor of the Renaissance Center, I can see the neighborhood where I grew up, small and distant below me, like my past pain has become. Wealthbridge just went public. My net worth hit $127 million overnight. Forbes wants me on their cover again. Harvard Business School wants me to give their commencement speech. The White House invited me to a tech summit. But the real victory isn't the money or recognition, it's the family I rebuilt on my own terms. Marcus is thriving as a master mechanic, earning honest money and raising his sons to respect women and work hard. He calls me weekly for business advice and never takes my success for granted. Keisha completed her addiction treatment and became a counselor helping other recovering addicts. She named her treatment center, Second Chances, and credits our family's redemption story as her inspiration. Patricia and Dad are healthier, happier, and humble. They brag about me constantly, making up for decades of indifference with overwhelming pride. They volunteer at my foundation that provides college scholarships to overlooked students. But here's the most important part, they learned that love isn't conditional on success, and success isn't diminished by sharing it with people who hurt you. I chose forgiveness not because they deserved it, but because I deserved peace. I chose rebuilding over revenge because creating something beautiful from something broken is the ultimate victory. They were right about one thing, I was their biggest mistake. I was the mistake that taught them what real strength looks like. I was the mistake that showed them love multiplies when you give it away. I was the mistake that proved sometimes the person you underestimate becomes the person you need most. And now I'm their greatest pride, their biggest inspiration, and their most valuable teacher. The empire I built isn't just made of money and success, it's made of grace, second chances, and the radical decision to love people back to life. That's a legacy worth more than any fortune.